This is VOA Africa. Hello, I'm Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent Makori. As to you what is off today. It's Monday, August the 10th, and this is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We are working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. French and Nigerian soldiers on Monday combed a wildlife reserve in Niger and the surrounding area for traces of the gunmen who killed 7 French aid workers a day earlier, according to a French military source. The unidentified gunmen who rode on motorbikes attacked the group who worked for humanitarian charity acted in a giraffe reserve just 65 kilometers from the capital Niamey. A Nigerian guide and a local driver employed by the acted were also killed. No one has claimed responsibility for the assault. France and other countries have warned people against traveling to parts of Niger where militants including Boko Haram, an affiliate of Islamic State, operate. The president of Mali's Change in Mali movement, Ramata Sissoko Cisse, says the group will begin nationwide and international protests on Tuesday to renew its demand for President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita's resignation. Cisse says Malians have concluded that the only way to restore peace in Mali is for Keita to step down. The renewed protest comes as it appears mediation efforts by the economic community of West African states have yet to be successful. The regional group is proposing a national unity government to allow the 75-year-old Keita to remain in power. The World Bank says it has approved $114 million to help Nigeria fight its coronavirus pandemic. The money is expected to come in the form of a $100 million loan and a $14 million grant to be split between Nigeria's 36 states and the acquirement of medical equipment, tests and medicine at the federal level. Nigeria has recorded nearly 47,000 coronavirus infections and at least 945 deaths. That's according to Johns Hopkins University data. But low amounts of testing appears to be clouding the severity of the outbreak. Nigeria is ramping up its effort to contain the COVID-19 outbreak, but more needs to be done at the state level, which are at the front line of the response, says Shoban Chaudhry, the World Bank director for Nigeria. Meanwhile, Algeria is further easing its coronavirus lockdown, including shrinking its overnight curfew to 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. and lifting some travel curbs. Large mosques are being allowed to reopen, along with beaches, entertainment venues, hotels, restaurants and cafes. The North African countries recorded over 35,000 coronavirus infections and more than 1,300 deaths, according to the latest data from Johns Hopkins University. New Lesotho Prime Minister Moeketsi Majoro says his government is doing reasonably well despite the many challenges inherited, including the COVID-19 pandemic, famine emergency and dwindling financial resources due to the poor economic performance in the Southern Africa region. The Prime Minister says the textile and garment industry, the country's largest private employer, has been the hardest hit due to the lack of export to the United States and South Africa, 2 countries heavily impacted by COVID-19. Thousands of parents, educators, students and community members are raising concerns that with the coronavirus still spreading, reopening schools for in-person learning is dangerous. The issue has become political, with pressure growing from the White House and many state governors to reopen the classrooms. Nina Veshneva has this report narrated by Anna Rice on recent school reopening demonstrations in New York City.
Thousands of parents, educators, students, and community members marched in the streets of Manhattan in early August to demand safe and equitable schools.
We lost a coworker to COVID in April, and we do not want any more teachers gone this fall. We need 100% remote schooling in the fall to keep everyone safe.
In New York, like many states, schools will reopen based on regional conditions. In New York City itself, students will be in classes for only up to 3 days a week.
Here's the deal. For the vast majority of kids in the vast majority of schools, you'll be going to school, to the classroom, either 2 days a week or 3 days a week, depending on the week. Again, certain other schools will have exceptional dynamics. We can talk about that as well.
If there is a confirmed case of COVID-19 in a school, the whole class will be quarantined for 2 weeks. If there are 2 positive cases in 2 different classes, the whole school will be quarantined. But for many teachers at the protest, sending children and educators back to the classroom is premature. They point out that some 1.5 million teachers, or 1 in 4, have pre-existing conditions, which makes them more vulnerable if they contract the coronavirus.
Our schools have already been overcrowded without proper ventilation or facilities, and they want to send us back even though cases are increasing nationwide, and there's no plan in place, and with budget cuts, no way.
This is my playground. I miss being on it.
The school that 5th grader Lawrence was attending has been closed since March, but he hopes to be back in the classroom soon. He's mindful of the pandemic, but dreams of playing with his friends and taking his favorite classes in person and not online.
I miss my friends, I miss my teachers, and I want to come back to school.
I think that the reopening plan is a sham because schools are going to be underfunded, under-resourced, and we will not have the classes that we need or the teachers that we need.
16-year-old Meryl Musoom says her classmates share her opinion. New York City mayoral candidate Diane Morales supports that view.
I am a former special education teacher, I am a former foster care social worker, and I am the parent of 2 young people with IEPs. And that is why I believe in and support teachers and students in the plan to not go back to school until schools are safe.
Despite the National Day of Protest, schools in Georgia, Mississippi, and other states are reopening, though some cases of coronavirus have emerged among students and school employees. For Nina Vishnova in New York, Anna Rice, VOA News.
Meet Cynthia Reyes, whose family has been living a nightmare. Reyes recently lost her father to COVID-19. With no time to mourn, the 35-year-old woman who has diabetes, asthma and rheumatoid arthritis also got the virus along with family members. Reyes lives in California's Imperial County, a farming region along the Mexican border with one of the state's highest coronavirus infection rates. VOA's Mariama Diallo has this report.
Dr. Tien Vo is making one of his last stops of the evening. His visit takes him to the home of Cynthia Reyes. Sitting on a reclining chair at her bedside, Reyes tells him she's finding it difficult to get up and move around.
I can't catch my breath. It takes me a long time to get out of the restroom. I feel like I'm gonna faint.
A picture of her dad taped on a vanity mirror is a fresh reminder that he's no longer with them.
My dad passed away the 17th. My mother had coronavirus.
Her mother, Margarita Reyes, says it's been a nightmare for the family. They haven't had time to process what has happened.
To grieve for my husband. I just have to be like on top of her, helping her.
Dr. Vo is the founder of 2 local medical centers that bear his name. He says a week later, Cynthia's symptoms had improved, but she was a long way from full recovery. His clinics have done more than 27,000 coronavirus tests since the end of March, with a positive rate between 25 and 30%.
We feel really, desperate. We need help. We need to get better.
They live in California's Imperial County, a farming region along the Mexican border. With a population of a little over 181,000, it has more than 9,500 cases. That translates to more than 5,100 cases for every 100,000 people, nearly triple hard-hit Los Angeles County. El Centro Regional Medical Center briefly stopped taking patients in May. Its CEO, Dr. Adolph Edwards, says many residents come in with pre-existing conditions.
It is the perfect storm, and it includes things outside of our control. I tell people by the time you come to the ICU, it's kind of late for you because the community already had high rates of asthma and diabetes.
Because of a lack of beds, more than 600 coronavirus patients had to be transferred to hospitals elsewhere in California. State and federal aid poured in, making it possible to set up an 80-bed hospital in a community college gymnasium.
I would ask the federal government, I'd ask the state government to rethink its strategy down here, and I would beg them to look at increasing our budget so that we can care for more people.
The jobless rate in the county was about 27% in June. At a weekly donation drive, hundreds lined up. Demand is up 50% since February, says Sarah Griffin, the Imperial Valley Food Bank executive director.
Our county is working so hard with the few resources we have to try to mitigate things as much as possible, and it's spiraling out of control.
About 240 people have so far died from the virus in a county that is largely Latino and low income, groups that have suffered disproportionately from the virus. Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
The United States now tops 5 million confirmed cases of COVID-19, and talks on Capitol Hill for a new coronavirus relief bill remain at an impasse, leading President Donald Trump to sign executive orders. Aisha Sarai has the latest.
In the absence of new legislation from Capitol Hill, President Trump this weekend signed executive orders promising some economic relief to the unemployed, but shifting the financial responsibility to individual states.
I'm taking action to provide an additional or an extra $400 per week in expanded benefits. $400, okay? So that's generous, but we want to take care of our people. Again, it wasn't their fault, it was China's fault. States will be asked to cover 25% of the cost using existing funding.
Democrats, who have pushed to maintain a $600 weekly benefit to at least 18 million unemployed Americans, say the order does not do enough.
Unfortunately, the president's executive orders, described in one word, could be paltry. In 3 words, unworkable, weak, and far too narrow. The event at the country club is just what Trump does, a big show, but it doesn't do anything.
The order also includes a deferment of payroll taxes, but does not protect Americans at risk of eviction.
There's no money to help us with elections, no money to help us with the post office, very little money to feed children, no money to feed children, and no real help for eviction of people. So they leave out a lot.
But the Trump administration maintains that its quick action was necessary because of gridlock on Capitol Hill.
The Democrats rejected various compromises at least twice, to my knowledge. The president felt he had to take action, and it will be timely action, and it will be temporary action, to be sure.
Some critics have questioned the legality of Trump's executive orders and expect to see lawsuits challenging their authority. Under U.S. law, Congress must approve spending legislation. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin told Fox News Sunday Trump's actions were cleared by his legal advisors. Isha Sarai, VOA News, Washington.
We are excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We are also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, how money is a big factor in U.S. college sports despite concerns over the coronavirus. We'll be right back.
Is about more than just sitting here and talking about women's issues. It's about listening to them
and bringing their opinions to the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Because our lived experiences, our stories, and our voices will help shape the next generation.
Hello, I'm Lenore Moudou, your VOA health correspondent.
Let us be perfectly clear.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, the World Health Organization says there is no information or evidence suggesting that the coronavirus can be transmitted by mosquitoes.
There are 2 published studies.
It is a respiratory virus which spreads primarily through droplets, generated when an infected person coughs or sneezes, or through droplets of saliva or discharge from the nose.
This happens during pandemics in the past.
For more information on COVID-19, visit who.int or contact your local or national health authorities.
Times change for political parties and the people who support them. Abraham Lincoln was the first U.S. president from the Republican Party. He led the country through the Civil War that preserved the Union and ended slavery. After the war, newly enfranchised African-American male voters supported the Republican Party, which was committed to civil rights for the recently emancipated. At the same time, the Democratic Party included white supremacists who opposed civil rights for black citizens. But during the 20th century, things began to change. Democrat Franklin D. Roosevelt, first elected in 1932, made his party more appealing to African Americans. FDR took measures to lead the country out of an economic depression. And while that was happening, civil rights became less important to many Republicans. African American support for FDR spiked in 1936, and support for Democratic presidential candidates has remained strong ever since. Another shift happened in the 1960s. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 passed with support from both parties at the urging of Democratic President Lyndon B. Johnson. After those votes, white segregationist Democrats fled the party in large numbers, creating Republican majorities across the South. The modern political landscape is now almost a reverse image of the one that existed more than a century ago, with African Americans overwhelmingly supporting the Democrats and Republicans backed predominantly by whites.
Welcome back. Ahead of the U.S. presidential election in November, polls show presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden leading President Donald Trump. While polls can reflect how popular a candidate is at a point in time, ahead of the U.S. presidential election in November, polls show presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden leading President Donald Trump. While polls can reflect how popular a candidate is at a point in time, they don't always predict the election results. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara spoke with 2 experts who have called the outcome of the election not based on polls, but on their own prediction models.
As we found in 2016, polls can be incorrect. So we asked 2 experts who have pretty good track records at predicting the outcome of a presidential race.
Alan J. Lichtman, Distinguished Professor of History at American University, and I have successfully forecast the outcomes of all 9 elections since 1984.
I'm Helen Norpals, Professor of Political Science at Stony Brook University. I predict elections, and the model I've developed gets 25 out of 27 elections since 1912 right.
Okay, what about methodology? Lichtman uses 13 keys, true or false questions about matters like the economy, foreign policy, party unity, and a candidate's charisma. A true answer earns a point for the incumbent, while a false answer earns a point for the challenger.
And if 6 or more keys are out against the White House party, they're a predicted loser.
NORPA's primary model uses presidential election statistics since 1912 with 1 key metric: which candidate won the early presidential primaries or state-level elections to choose a party's presidential nominee for the November election.
I have another predictor, which I call sort of the swing of the pendulum, that one can track for almost 200 years.
The verdict?
Donald Trump has a 91% chance of winning the election.
Donald Trump will lose his re-election bid.
Lichtman changed his prediction after the pandemic and social unrest.
What was his name?
As of late 2019, he gave the election to Trump, but...
So in just a matter of a few months, Donald Trump and the Republicans went from what looked like a sure win with just 4 keys against them to a predicted loss with 7 keys one more than needed to predict their defeat.
For Norpoth, a registered independent, neither pandemic nor protest has a bearing on his verdict.
My forecast that I make is unconditional and final. It's written in stone. It cannot bend, but it may break in the end. There's a chance, like 9%, that it's gonna come out wrong. So that's a chance I'm taking.
While both scholars say their predictions are final, Lichtman, a Democrat, said there are two things out of his model's control: election meddling and voter suppression.
The Republican base is old white guys like me. That is the most shrinking part of the electorate. The GOP cannot manufacture new old white guys. But what they can try to do is suppress the vote of the rising Democratic base of minorities and young people. That has me worried.
Neither Lichtman nor Norpoth is even looking at polls for their crystal ball.
We're living in an age of cancel culture, woke politics, etc. And maybe some people are reluctant to admit, even to a pollster, that they're supporting Donald Trump because it doesn't sound right, doesn't sit right with a lot of people.
Whoever wins, remember that you heard it first from one of these guys. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
People trapped inside during the coronavirus lockdown are playing a lot of video games. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, entrepreneurs are catering to young people's love for video games and sharing the gaming experience with small groups of friends. Anastasia Tudeshu reports from Kinshasa.
Jonathan Niembo is in the last year of medical school, so the 25-year-old has little time for anything else. But when he does, it's video games.
So I'm really busy with everything I do because saving lives is the most important thing. But sometimes when we have free time, maybe once or twice a month, we say to ourselves, why not find some friends, some brothers, and come play a little game to balance things out.
Niembo plays at the Immersion Gaming Hall in Kinshasa's Gombe neighborhood. Manager Paul Belingo says it is a place to relieve stress and pursue the passion that brings gamers together.
In this room, firstly, we find virtual reality. Here are some of the different games: football games, fights, missions, car racing games. There is also the Oculus, which is a device that lets you play in 360 degrees.
At $10 an hour, not everyone can afford the comfort of playing here. Gamer Christelle Nidem Kalenga says Kinshasa gamers represent a broad cross-section of the Congolese society.
I will say that most gamers are between 16 and 25 years old. Most of them still live with their parents. They are students. Contrary to what people may think, they are not all from well-off families, so they live very, very far from the city and practice in smaller game rooms.
Jogo Marcelo's gaming hall serves a different clientele, but the passion for video games is the same.
Oh, let me tell you, people come in droves. When there is no electricity shortage, there is no downtime. I would say I welcome 30 to 40 people a day.
Marcelo opened his hall in 2014 as a way to profit from his love of gaming and keep young people from getting into trouble.
They like it so much in here because it is entertainment. Instead of going to the wrong places and acting wrong or sitting in front of the good old television, they come here. It makes them feel good, you know? For just 50 cents, they can have a great time and avoid who knows what. We do this for our youth.
Kalanga says video gaming is a rich opportunity for Congolese entrepreneurs.
Worldwide, the video game economy is currently worth over $100 billion, and Africa takes only 4% of that. 4%. Africa still has room for improvement in this business. So what I'm doing is trying to raise awareness in DRC, awareness among the government, the parents, the gamers, and the artists about the opportunities this sector could bring here.
Like Marcelo, Kalanga realized there was a lucrative side to her passion. The 23-year-old marketing and communication consultant organized Congo's first Comic-Con event 2 years ago called Manga and Geeks.
Between 2018 and 2019, I tripled the number of participants. I didn't expect this. Of course, I felt that there was a community, but I wasn't too sure. After the first edition, I realized there was a real economy behind the games. There were real opportunities. In fact, I realized that the video game industry or even the comic book industry could be a solution in a country like DRC.
Congolese gamers say maximizing that potential depends on steady electricity and more affordable and reliable internet connections, infrastructure improvements that are central to boosting foreign investment and sustaining the country's young video game market. Anastasie Tudiesh for VOA News, Kinshasa.
The coronavirus pandemic has caused colleges and universities in the U.S. to rethink how they will keep their students safe this fall. But in the case of sports, many institutions fear losing a significant portion of their revenue if games are cancelled. Aisha Sarai and Bart Vendever have more.
Colleges and universities, many already under financial strain, could face additional funding hardships if they cut sports programs.
You know, there's never a good time for a pandemic, but for college sports, I think this was particularly bad because it happened right at the beginning of the men's basketball tournament. And the men's basketball tournament is the largest source of revenue for the NCAA.
According to figures from the National Collegiate Athletic Association, or NCAA, college sports make roughly $1 billion annually in ticket sales and promotions for the universities. Athletic dollars from basketball, football, and baseball can contribute more than half of a school's operating budget.
That loss of revenue this year will be felt not just this year, but for the next several years to come.
Some of that money trickles down to students through financial aid. There are more than 20,000 international student athletes enrolled in competing NCAA schools. These schools provide more than $2.9 billion in athletic scholarships to students annually.
Prior to the pandemic, I was pretty confident that I would be able to get a scholarship with the improvements that I would have made during the season. But because of the ending of the season, that didn't happen. Hopefully, in the end, I'll be able to still get a scholarship and still be competitive at the college level.
Some schools are pushing to go ahead with their college football season, a move that will require a huge increase in COVID-19 testing for their athletes.
They don't necessarily have the right resources to do all the testing. So it's a concern because I don't know of a university football team that hasn't had positive cases.
But Thomas Horde, who is working with colleges and universities to increase their testing capacity, understands the push to not cancel sports.
The economic impact to the universities is huge, as you can imagine. I think the budget for football is like $500 million for Texas. And so it's not a small feat. What do you do with season ticket holders? What do you do with, people that have already bought tickets? Can you refund all that money, or have you allocated it somewhere else already?
Whether schools will delay sports seasons or be forced to cancel them entirely is yet to play out. Isha Sarai, VOA News, Washington.
Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching and stay safe.